South Africa celebrates 25 years of democracy. Rwanda commemorates the most horrific events on the continent a quarter of a century ago. The Rwandan Massacre haunted both the late former President Nelson Mandela and late former UN Chief Kofi Annan.
As millions of Rwandans across the globe mark the day, foreign editor Sophie Mokoena looks back at the tragic chapter in our history.
Rwanda, one of the Great Lakes region countries. In 1994, millions of Rwandans were brutally killed, a massacre that became a black spot on the history of the continent. This happened while the world was watching, and some international countries had a hand.
The cabinet has decided to provide the humanitarian assistance to the people of Rwanda, by way of medical supplies, by way of funds. And as I have pointed out before, the Secretary General of the United Nations has asked us to provide 50 armored personnel carriers with drivers. They wanted to list them from us. Now, we want to consider this matter seriously.
We do this also, Mr. President, because we know that the apartheid regime that our people defeated in 1994, too late to make a difference to what happened in this country, supplied some of the weapons that were used by those who massacred 1 million of their compatriots and fellow Africans in 100 days. We remember too, Mr. President, that when we acted on the request of your movement to ask the apartheid regime to stop the supply of the weapons of death, representatives of that oppressor regime in our country boldly asserted the precedence of profit from the sale of the instruments of death over the lives of the people of Rwanda. To that extent, we too, as South Africans, contributed to the diabolical slaughter of the innocents.
The UN was heavily criticized.
Why were General Romeo Dallaire and his undermanned and under-equipped contingent of UN peacekeepers abandoned by the same people who sent them to Rwanda? Why did those who dispose of enormous global power that has been used to determine the fate of all humanity, why did they decide that the slaughter in the Balkans in Yugoslavia had to be stopped at all costs, while the bigger slaughter in Rwanda should be allowed to run its full course?
Now, France has announced that it will investigate the role it played during this massacre.
To those who resisted, those who stood up for their right to life and defended themselves and their families, to all those who died in the fight, thank you for going down so valiantly. A very special tribute to those men and women who showed enormous courage, risked their lives to rescue their neighbors and friends. You showed the greatest act of human kindness. You risked your own lives to save another.
But the country has not allowed history to determine its destiny. It has since made huge progress in rebuilding itself.
The tragedy we have seen in the many years past are going to be overcome by not blame game, pointing fingers at each other, internal, external, because let's face it, you gave it a history that dates back into colonial times.
Yes.
That is a fact, it's real. It feeds into the other failures we experienced of our own, yes, meaning the African societies, leaders, across the board. So all that we've known, we've experienced, we've gone through, and I think so it suffices that today we look at the real way of getting forward and moving forward and finding solutions to the many problems instead of that.
Sophie Mokoena, SABC News, Johannesburg.